Okay, this will be our second screenshot video. Weeks 9 to 10 crimes. I want to take a look at the last affirmative defense we're considering, the affirmative defense of entrapment. And it's been my sense that this defense is commonly misunderstood, particularly by people who are charged with crimes. I did criminal defense work for a number of years, and people from time to time would say, I was entrapped, when in fact the evidence made it very difficult, if not impossible, to show that they were entrapped. And what I'm driving at is that when the state simply gives a person an opportunity to commit a crime, that by itself will not amount to a good defense of entrapment. And don't forget, it's an affirmative defense. So the defendant must show not only that the defendant was given an opportunity to commit the crime, but that the methods used to obtain the evidence against the defendant created a substantial risk that the offense would be committed by a person who was not otherwise inclined to commit the crime. And here's where a lot of people run into the problem. Let me just stop. Why in the world is the government out trying to lure people into committing crimes? Well, that's because the government would argue there are a number of criminal offenses that are of the type where people are not going to self-report. In other words, if I go home today and someone's burglarized my residence, I'm going to call the cops, report that there was a burglary, and probably something was stolen, so there was a burglary and a larceny. If someone beats me up, I'm going to call the cops and say, hey, I want to report an assault. I think you're catching the drift. But I don't think what's going to happen is someone's not going to walk into the police station today and say, by the way, I want to report that a person just sold me a few packets of heroin. Or someone is going to call the police and say, I just want to let you know that I just paid somebody a certain amount of money for a sexual activity. So in these types of offenses, the government is going to tell you it needs to ferret out the perpetrators, and the way to do it is to lure people into committing the crimes, giving them an opportunity. And what about the innocent citizenry? Well, the innocent citizenry doesn't have any problems because they're not inclined to commit the crime. So if given a chance to sell drugs, they're not going to sell drugs. If given a chance to pay someone for a sexual experience, they're not going to do it. I think you're catching my drift. I'm reminded when I first came to town a long time ago, I was working for a judge, and I don't know, the first or second week I was working for him, which would have been my first or second week in Buffalo, there was a narcotics case, and an undercover agent was testifying how he made a buy from the defendant. Well, fast forward to that weekend, and I'm sitting in a bar somewhere on the Elmwood Avenue Strip by myself, and this fellow walks up and takes a seat next to me, and start chatting about football or whatever, as people, I guess, do at a bar. And the next thing I know, he's asking me, hey, by the way, do you I think it was just marijuana, but do you use marijuana, or do you know where a guy can get some marijuana? And I just smiled and said, nah, I'm not your guy, and finished my beer and left. Certainly, what he was doing was not entrapment, because a person who was not otherwise inclined to commit the crime wasn't going to commit it based on the methods he was using. So, again, that's really where the defense falls apart. An example where I saw the defense work, and you're going to see that this was a case that didn't rise to the level of duress, but it had that kind of vibe to it. So there was a young guy. I was just thinking in Allentown, and there was a bar in Allentown. I guess there still are, they tell me, and he was a young college kid, and he was hanging out in the bar. And this is at a time when the drinking age was either 18 or 19, so he was really young. First time away from home, and an older guy, mid-20s, they run into each other in the bar. I know the bar. It used to be called Birdie's 19th Hole. I don't know if it's called the Pink now or whatever, but so they're in Birdie's 19th hole. They start hanging out a little bit. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? Hey, you want to go down to this place and that place? And I think they occasionally would smoke a little pot. Then what happens is the guy was a little bit rough looking to this young man. He described him sort of as like looked like a motorcycle gang kind of guy. The night came when the rough-looking guy said to the young kid, "Hey, we're in trouble because I told these guys we could get them some LSD, and we got to do it." And the kid goes, "What are you talking about? I never said I had LSD, etc." And I think the kid might have bragged to the guy, "Yeah, I know how to get a hold of LSD," which, by the way, in the mid 1970s wasn't very difficult to do. But so this goes on where the I'm going to call him the motorcycle guy is saying, these people are rough. They're expecting us to come through. The kid at that point obviously should have spoken to his parents or spoken to somebody who had some sense, but he didn't. He got freaked out. And I'm really fast, telling the story. But he eventually gets a hold of some LSD. And he and the motorcycle guy go to meet the sellers, or strike that, to meet the buyers. And of course, the buyers were DEA agents. The motorcycle guy was agreeing to cooperate to work off drug charges against him. And the kid is charged with attempted sale of LSD. It's a pretty substantial offense. And we decided to go non-jury. It was in federal court. And the judge, after hearing the evidence, found the defendant not guilty, and he accepted the defense of entrapment. But notice in that case, it wasn't just first opportunity. The defendant sold the drugs. The other guy prevailed on him, sort of threatened him in a way. And the judge, bless his heart, found that the methods used to get the kid to sell the drugs did create a substantial risk that the offense would have been committed by somebody not otherwise inclined to commit the crime. But it really takes some doing to establish the defense of entrapment. All right, we'll end this short video, and we'll be back with our next 2-week study. We'll be talking about, among other things, the defense of justification.